Welcome, everyone, to Mysteries of Earth. We are doing a deep dive discussion on human change. We just released this video, and there was such an incredible response. We decided that we would just impromptu jump in live and have a discussion about this with Dave. We're going to go ahead and just jump right into the video. If you haven't seen it, pause the video and go watch it. Now, we're going to work our way through it and take detours and rabbit holes and all kinds of things. So without further ado, let's go ahead and play the video, and I'll stop it as soon as we got our first question.
The human body has these things on the end of the mitochondrial DNA called telomeres. These little tuning fork-like things.
Okay, first question. Now you say tuning fork. Is it literally has a frequency to it? Is that what you mean?
It has multiple frequencies. They're complex sounds. It's not a lot of people got caught on this idea that it's a single frequency. It's not. Think of it as a shape in sound. It literally extends the entire range. One of the remarkable things about it is that it has this progression called the March of Nines. And I believe that's what Tesla was getting at with 369 back in the beginning. When you look at the frequencies it keys on, 432 is the center C as far as a note, which just happens to be the same as Solfeggio. The other part of it is that up around 115 kilohertz, there's a very good stimulator for cellular mitosis. It's used in the MLS laser and in some of the new laser pain relief systems, as well as at 635 nanometer, which is way up in the light frequencies, pulsating 115 kilohertz at 635 nanometer will actually cause the fat cells in the human body to release the fluid inside. I think it's called Geflin. But wow. It releases the fluid in your interstitial space, and they sell treatments. You can literally go into a clinic, and they shine this light on you for 20 minutes, and you lose fat mass. You don't lose the fat cells, just the volume of fat. And that product is called Ultra Slim, and it's FDA approved. It was studied in Brazil. It's an actual treatment. Now, the multispectral laser uses 800 nanometer and 635 nanometer pulsed at 115 kilohertz. And it's used for pain relief, for cellular growth stimulation. They use it on burn victims. And it's like mainstream science.
So, I mean, talk to me. I mean, jump back to the frequency thing. So I'm a musician. I'm the editor of the video. I'm a musician. Okay. I love music. I'm still hung up on just the power of frequencies in our reality. I mean, so, objects have a resonant frequency. Explain to me again this whole idea of the DNA and the frequency. Like, explain that again. I'm still
okay. So
trying to wrap my mind around it.
When they first saw it, the first time they saw it was they were researching the mitochondrial DNA. It's actually on the end of chromosomes. So the telomeres are sitting on the end of the chromosomes. And when sound hits them, they echo a sound back.
And telomeres are what makes people get old. If people don't know that, you get old because your telomeres shorten.
Right. The shortening of the telomeres causes the signal to become weaker. This is what's really interesting. Now, there are a couple of drugs that increase human growth hormone, pituitary hormones. One of them is called sermorelin, and the stuff's actually really cool. It has a high risk of cancer because it can trigger metastasis. So you have to take C38 metastatic enzyme inhibitors while you're doing it. You have to keep close tabs on while you're doing it. but it actually does bring your human hormone system back into a younger age. Resultingly, because your health increases, your telomeres actually get longer. Now, telomere science right now, they're kind of trying to find a mechanical method of doing things. And I think, and this is just my opinion, but from what I've read, I think they're going about it the wrong way. I think they're looking at something that's the result instead of the cause, and they're looking at it as causal. Now, the weird thing about these little areas of the chromosomes is that when the sound hits them, they send a sound back. And as that sound increases, we get a photonic emission. Now, they're called biophotonics. It's an actual field in medical photonics now. And it generates a measurable energy pattern around a human body. And one of the very coolest things is that recently they discovered that cancer cells have a different sound coming out of them. And I'm saying sound, meaning all the way from acoustic to light frequencies and beyond, I guess, because when you look at some of the shapes, they have square edges.
Wait, did you just say there's an overlap to sound and light frequency? Like there's a point.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Dave, from what I understand, sound and light are essentially just frequency patterns.
Well, the light acts as both a wave and a particle. And, maser sound has the same characteristics in modern, like Bose technology and some of the modern acoustic technologies, like LRAD, area denial systems, are able to lens sound. And there's also ultrasonic spot speakers that can be used in auditoriums and large venues to actually focus. Like if a presenter has not a presenter, but a booth has a video playing and they don't want that audio blasted all over the place, it focuses the sound directly beneath where the viewing area is.
Right.
So that only the people watching the video are hearing it. And those technologies, it acts a lot like light, but it's not light.
Okay.
In the same situation with the biophotonics, we can see a light emission. And when I say see, I'm talking about with an ultraspectral and multispectral cameras. You can tune in and actually see the light coming off the cells. The cells emit light.
Right.
The patterns, it's not a single frequency. And this is very, very important because the differentiations are groups of at least 5 different base frequencies.
So it's a harmony.
It's a harmony, yeah. And that forms a shape similar to what we see with cymatics. When you look at the cymatics in a non-Newtonian fluid, you get these wonderful shapes. A friend of mine who I met through my wife's art business, it's got a guy named John Edmark, and he does wonderful work with kinetic sculptures using this. I'll drop a link for you, post up there. He's a really cool guy.
We got cymatics going on the screen from that part of the video.
Yeah.
This is really interesting, Dave, because I mean, this is a whole nother field, but I come from an astrology background, and in astrology, all these planets are frequencies that harmonize together to create an imprinted pattern for each person, depending on the time and space and location that they're born. So these these sounds that you speak of that are coming from outside the universe, I personally, I can see how that happens through these other planetary spheres, because those are also different frequencies.
The planets themselves actually have a noise. Like
right.
There's recent recordings of Saturn, which are really interesting.
Yeah, it's the same thing with like a lot of people, follow the Schumann resonance of the earth.
Right,
There's
exactly. 7.8 hertz
yeah.
with all of the marches going up. And when I'm talking about marches, are you familiar with music theory and the March of Fives, March of
Yes.
Nines per chord?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
the exact same thing. It's the March of
Right.
Nines. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all yeah. So from what I understand, it's not I think this is where I kind of got hung up in the beginning was I was thinking of a single spectrum or a single frequency, but it's the harmonization of many frequencies that create
Uh,
these things. Is that correct?
that's correct. Ascension. I'm dropping some links to different videos in the private chat on this.
Yeah, we
So
got Saturn here. I'll pull those up while you guys listen to Saturn. It's a minute.
yeah. Now again, in the sound of Saturn, these are way above human hearing frequencies. So this is in the top range of our hearing. Now, if you can imagine something that large, now there's this argument, oh, space is a vacuum and no sound travels through a vacuum. Well, that's not exactly, the space is not exactly a vacuum. There is a particulate mass, and we do receive the light off from this. And the light is modulated in the same way that the sound would be modulated local to the device or the item, like the arcs that are making that sound. So we do actually have an imprint, very, very faint, on the surface of the Earth of the
Right.
sound.
Right.
So we have to remember that a lot of the traditions that various old religions were built on were actually the form of science that was funded at the time. So when we look at astrological studies and astrology in general, what they're doing is they're actually taking years and years and years of observation and congealing it into a sort of a science of predicting the rhythms. And the
Yeah.
rhythm is absolutely real.
Yeah, it's a natural science that is very intricate. There's tons of mathematics involved and observation over thousands of years.
Mhm.
So yeah, I know what you mean there. I don't know, I know a lot of people aren't real clear on what it is because there's so much pop astrology out there,
Right.
but it's a very real thing.
And many Christian faiths and Muslim faiths saw it as divination.
Yeah.
So it was immediately put aside as being not of a good thing, an evil thing, because it was divinating. Now, John is showing on the screen right now, he's showing some of the three-dimensional shapes and spirals that he creates. Now, when we think of cymatics in 3 dimensions, John's work is very similar. His cones that you see in the background in this little video, he goes through all the gears and everything and how he calculates things and figures out how the spirals work mathematically. Now, John's great pieces of artwork are these spinning reflective blooms, they're called. And they are actually what, if we could see sound in front of us, that's what the sound looks like. If we could see the actual sound.
Yeah.
So not at this point, but you'll see in a moment. He's showing the different progressions here of the spiral. If you go forward a little bit, you'll see the blooms. Yeah, right there. Start there.
Over here and around and around and around, placing these and placing these. And when that's done in that fashion, you end up getting these kinds of very evenly distributed seed heads.
So
but the spirals are actually a symptom.
He's showing the spirals that are generated by this sound that comes in. Now, his artwork actually is focusing on the mathematics of the spirals, not the sound of them, but it gives you a good visual representation of how that sound creates pressure waves in 3 dimensions. So you can see how things are flowing here in these videos.
That's pretty wild. All right, well, we better keep going because we're only
Go right ahead.
about 33 seconds in. So, all right, we'll switch back.
Tuning fork-like things create a tuning of a sound that comes in from outside of the universe.
Okay, now comes from outside of the universe. Where? What would you say is the source of these sounds? Again, did the planets?
I have a religious context for it, but when they did the assays, at first when they were doing the pyramid, there was incoming. They thought it was neutrino or pi muon coming in from the sun, and the way this was done during the pyramid scan was large plates were put into the inner chambers, and they looked at the evidence of particles or waves going through the plates. The plates were sensitive to pi muons, and what they found was voids in the pyramid. That's what they were looking for. Now, the interesting thing is that they were non-directional. They were coming in from everywhere. They were coming in from below, like right through the earth, and they were coming in from all sides. And originally they thought that it was only coming in from about 7 degrees off axis of the sun is where the initial point was, that they could see it very easily. And there was a bunch of stuff that was written about there being a neutrino source near the sun or something like that back at the time. Now, when they did the Antarctic assay, it came from everywhere. It literally was coming in every direction.
So what is an assay? You said the Antarctica assay. That's an assessment or a measurement?
It's a whole sky. In astronomical terms, they would go degrees of declination, degrees of what do they call it? Declination and ascension, I think, is the two measurements they use. It's a radian measurement of half a sphere. So if you can imagine, they do 2 pi to form half of a hemisphere, but they're looking in all directions. And they produce some very beautiful artwork. Maybe we could find that real quick. The artwork was the actual map of the whole sky.
So, Dave, let me make sure that I understand this, and other people can understand this. They're using some kind of technology to take measurements of sound in these areas to assess where this sound is originating from. Is that correct?
Yeah, they were basically looking at this sound that was coming in and trying to figure out where it's coming from.
And how did they first detect this sound to be able to actually say, okay, we need to do an assessment of this?
They had plates that were sensitive to basically what they considered neutrinos. So my understanding, they were similar to a chamber that has acetone in it. When a neutrino very, very seldomly collides with a molecule of acetone, it will emit a couple of photons or a photon of light.
Okay.
So they're able to image that. Well, they have sensing devices that are a type of film, like a astronomical film, that is sensitive to those single bursts of light. Now, I'm not sure what they treat it with, but I imagine it's something like acetone. I posted the PDFs of the reports of those 2 surveys.
Okay.
So you can share those with people. Those are public documents. Now, I'm going to throw up an image or a link to an image showing just a visual light spectrum of the whole sky as it was seen. So that'll be in the private chat there. You can relay that. Do you see that there? Go ahead and click on it.
Yep, pulling it up.
So
want-
here is light photons coming from every direction. This would be polar assay, I believe. I'm not certain of that, but I think this is one of the polar assays. So this is an example of a whole sky assay.
So you said they measured with plates, like plate sensors?
Yeah, like photographic plates. When I'm saying plates, think of not a CCD device, but more like a better light scanner. But if you can imagine a photographic sensitive plate that has dark treatment over it so that no light hits it. Internally, it produces a photon that's actually recorded in the film. So they create that film. Now, they interpolate the color and everything else. This is all false color. The picture that's up there is not the actual color. This may be on intensity. It may be on a frequency. But it shows the light coming in from all directions. And that's what we're talking about. This is the sound, because it's across the entire spectrum. It's not when we think of light, we always think of the differentiation between light and sound. We only see down into around 800 nanometer on light, and we hear up to, some people can hear up to about 41 kilohertz. I think for little kids can hear that high of a frequency. But there's this big gap between of wavelengths that we're not equipped physically to perceive, but yet those wavelengths are there. So
Crazy. So they put these plates out in Antarctica, and this is pretty much what it came out to be. They just tweaked the colors a little bit.
Yep.
Okay.
And this is what you're referring to as biophotonic photography of sorts?
No. Ultraspectral photography
Okay.
is an actual type of sensor. I'll see if I can grab the company.
And the whole point is just to show that frequencies like are coming in from outside of our realm. And do frequencies go back out then too?
I believe so. Yeah, that's my personal opinion, is that it actually
humans, we generate a frequency, right?
Yeah, what's interesting, I haven't been able to find it again, but I remember as an early kid reading about theories of light in the like the early 1700s. There was someone who came up with the idea that light was emitted from our eyes and bounced off from objects, returning to our eyes to give us the sense of vision. And it always it was like, yeah, that's not what happens. But maybe there's something to that. Maybe he did see or detect or summarize, or it's there. And I just can't find the person who came up with that idea. But I do remember it from, when like I said, when I was a little kid, reading encyclopedias, but
well, it's interesting though, because color is also a harmony of frequencies.
That's correct.
So, and I've listened to several, people such as yourself that have talked about, color, shapes, the way we see, and the way that our optics work in our heads. So yeah, this is. I'm sorry, I really didn't have a point, but I was just kind of thinking out loud.
Oh, actually, Wikipedia to the rescue. Hyperspectral imaging in Wikipedia.
Yeah.
They have a good little article here on it. And these cameras, there's a company out in Hawaii that's making cameras that actually can detect human emotion, which I thought was really interesting. Now, they're not, there's broad spectrum. Ultra spectrum goes all the way from sound frequencies all the way out past visible light. So we get, ultraviolets and everything else in the image. It's not really an image. It's a collection of data, almost like a DICOM. A DICOM is a type of image used, or type of data collection for a magnetic resonance, like an MRI.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. All right, let's keep. We're coming out of the part where it says, is it pi muons with the pyramid? Okay, so let's hit that up.
About 5 years ago, they were scanning the Great Pyramid for cavities inside the pyramid and found a pi muon radiation coming in from all directions through the pyramids.
Okay, tell us about that. Wow.
Actually, that's what we were just speaking of. The sound that's coming in, and I keep using sound because it's not a specific frequency, but it was triggering photons to be produced that expose the plate. Now, you can have photons in a low wavelength or a high wavelength. It's a type of energy. It's not in an electromagnetic field. It's not exactly a pressure wave, but both produce pressure waves. So, it's one of these things where our science is new and we don't actually have like distinctive words for this stuff. And it's not my ignorance of it. It's the fact that it's kind of like when they came up with the idea of spam for unwanted messaging. They have to come up with some concrete words for it. Now, in the photonics fields, they have thresholds of intensities, and they're in the hyperspectral. These are very low thresholds. In the type of scanning, the pi muon scanning, they're looking for what is assumed to be, it's still theoretical, that these light discharges that are recorded on film are caused by neutrinos passing through. So a pi muon is a type of muon that's associated with the transfer of energy of a photon. So
Fascinating. That's crazy. So what led them to start doing this, and how long have they been measuring stuff in this manner?
As far as I know, back in the early 1960s, a lot of quantum physics. Now, I make the argument of some of the cloud traces back in 26. There was the ammonia cloud trace photographs that were taken of atomic decay. These are the spiral photographs that people see. And I believe they were actually detecting that type of energy back then, the mu. Yeah.
So I'm sorry, going back to the pyramids, Dave. So if they're measuring these coming out of this pyramid structure, what do you think those pyramids were used for?
I'm partial to some of Mike Dunn's work. I have my own it's an idea that I have, a hypothesis drawn off from what ground truth I've seen already. But I believe that we did have some form of catastrophe here on Earth,
Mm-hmm.
and that the pyramid was built literally as a compass point. When you take a look at a map, there's an 8-sided compass point
Mm-hmm.
that's printed on maps to give you concept of direction. And I have a feeling, and it's sort of a hunch, that the 8-sided pyramid, the Khufu or Cheops pyramid, is actually a fiducial, like a point. Okay, so now this point is here, measure everything from here type thing. Now, this gets into the argument of were there much more advanced societies in the past? And
Right.
I have seen firsthand evidence of that being true. And when I'm saying evidence of that being true, I've seen stoneworks that are not possible for us to do today.
Right.
And
Yeah. Go ahead.
that technology, however they did that, we no longer have. And that's saying a lot right there.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting that there are so many pyramid structures around the world, and there's different theories that are not mainstream, not accepted, but it does get into the ancient races and civilizations and into cosmic war type theories. But these things also line up, like you said. I've seen it
Yeah,
through
like
the
there was
lens
an
of
old crater.
astronomy. They measure certain astrological points in the sky.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely correlation for astronomical alignments all across. The star pattern stuff, that some of the stuff that Graham Hancock was talking about is
Yeah.
arguable because they selected out of, there was a lot more structures than what I'm talking about. The Drago constellation correlation with the stuff in Indonesia, and there were a lot more sites than what they correlated. As far as the alignment with Orion's belt, I'm not certain of that either. Now, time wise, it puts it about where I think the time would be, around 12,000 years ago, not 4,500 years ago. I'm talking about for Cheops. So, maybe there's something to that. There's a lot of evidence for that epic being around 12,000, 11,000, 12,000 years ago. There's fields in the Midwest that have like river bottom ripples, very large, that show that there was some kind of a large lake, like an ice lake there. That ended about 11,000 years ago. There's a sign for a mass extinction event around the world that's in stratigraphy about 11,000 years ago. And it's not the KT boundary. I'm not talking about, the 65 million year olds, according to mainstream science boundary. Right. I'm talking about stratigraphy that has a large number of dead animals in the layer,
Yeah.
So something happened back then. Now, what I did see, which was really, really cool, wasn't, I'm not like a 2012 guy or anything. I just happened to be in Ollantaytambo, Peru. We came up on the train from Cusco, and we had to carry our luggage up. It was nighttime. We were carrying our luggage up and everything. We got up there about 9 o'clock. So I'm sitting out on the balcony of the hotel, smoking, and I'm looking up at what I can make the outline out of the Ollantaytambo temple there. And I see this real super bright light come on. So I wake my wife up and I said, "Hey, honey, come out and take a look at this. They're putting on a light show, right?" And we saw the red quartz or red basalt rocks light up, and then about 20 minutes it all faded, right? So there was no light show. What happened was the moon rose between two mountains in the Andes Mountains, reflected off from gypsum walls that they call the granaries, and it reflected the light onto that red granite wall, the 6-stone giant stone wall there. And what was interesting was that when you look through the mountain gap, the sides of those mountains were excavated. They've been cut. Now, not in modern time. Now, that correlation only happens every 26,000 years, where the moon would come up exactly between those two mountains and reflect off from that spot. So that site had an astronomical marker at 26,000 years. Now, what was interesting is in the following day, we were moving on. We were headed over to Paracas, but we went around the temple, checked all that out, and we weren't interested so much in the tourist things, but just wanted to take a look, since we were there. We heard that after we had left, they had started talking about discovering a pyramid in the valley between the red stones and the quarry where the red stones were taken from. Now, when we were up on the top of the hill, we could see, I was pointing it out to my wife. I said, "Look at the waterways that they created. Look how they come to that intersection over there." We were actually looking at the top of the pyramid. Now, it's so freaking big that your mind plays games with you on perspective. You can't get your head around how big this thing is. And this is a structure sitting up there. Now, we saw so many things like that there that I think what happened is I think that previous civilization used the pyramids some which way. Not certain of what the technology is. There's a guy named Mike Dunn. He's a metrologist, works up in Greensboro, North Carolina, by BMW. What he does, he goes around and calibrates instruments for machine shops. So Mike actually went over and he does tool signs analysis and looking at the way tools cut things. And he got called in by David Childers and a couple other guys that were researching over there, and he got really enthused with it. So he's been in a lot of different places. But Mike came up with the idea of the pyramids being a type of resonator. And what's interesting is that the obelisks that are around the world are all made of quartz. They're different basalts and granites, but the amount of quartz in them is very high. Now, if you were to create a giant radio transmitter, let's say it was transmitting good vibes, who knows what the hell they're transmitting, but the taps would look just like those monoliths. So
Sure.
his theory is that it's a energy system of some kind. Now, atmospheric energy. Now, there is something called telluric currents that are natural currents that form subsurface on the Earth, and these are electrical currents that flow through the surface of the Earth. Ancient sites are built on intersections of those telluric currents. Now, there's a lot of crap about ley lines, and I'm not a woo-woo guy. I'm looking at this like this is evidence of some form of science, technology. It could be a religious belief. In my opinion, a lot of religion is the misunderstanding of empirical science of the time. I think a lot of things in Hindu faith are actually to support knowledge. In other words, the ceremonies support the ancient knowledge, keep it in the environment. Most of the temples, if you were to walk through a temple, you see knots, the nagas, all the sculptures of the nagas are different forms of knots that are a form of industry. So let's say that was only 1,400 years ago, which I don't believe so. I believe it's more like 12,000 again. That's my point of bringing it up. Is there's all these signs of an epoch that ended, and I believe that's the case. I think something happened. In my opinion, I think it was the tail of a comet that ice came into the Earth's atmosphere, causing global heating, tremendous amount of heating, and an increase in the amount of water on Earth. And the result was ice shelves melting, and basically the end of the ice age. And you would have something called isostasis, which is when you have 4 miles of ice on top of something and it melts, the ground lifts. We're not on a solid rock. We're more like a plastic ball. So when the pressure is relieved, the ground pops up. So, just drain your pool and watch what happens. The pool will pop out. So that's what I think has actually happened to our geography around the world. And I think the people, like the people who buried Göbekli Tepe at the same time, I think they were experiencing tremendous upheavals.
Yeah.
And try to create stationary fixed points that they could reference to maintain some form of their civilization.
Absolutely. I think that the ancestors, other races, whatever, were leaving, like there are signs everywhere that point us in these directions that were recorded in all of these religions, these ancient texts and things in like Göbekli Tepe. Like I followed that very closely, and I think that they knew something was happening, and they covered it up to protect it.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think some of the mounds, the dolmens, those look, yes, they were used for grave sites. But if you were aware of a meteorological event that was going to drop stones out of the sky, that's the kind of structures you would build.
Right.
And, there's far too many of them for them to all be king's graves, right? That's the official term, is that the dolmens were king's graves. And you have dolmens in India, when the English archaeological teams and the German archaeological teams backed by the Nazis came through, they had this concept of a great Nordic race, which is interesting because there's one item of credibility to it, but that there was a northern race that brought culture and technology and singing and music and everything else to the whole world. So their exploration included taking whatever was found and putting it in the context of that theory. So when we look at Egyptology, the work of Flinders Petrie was all based on this concept that there was this Germanic Aryan race that came through and did all these things and created all these things. The same thing with Hindi. They pushed this idea that there was this Aryan race about 1,400 years ago that created the whole culture. Problem is that there's evidence of much, much older stuff that is, like the yogi, the recent thing where they found the yogi paintings, where there's positions that are painted and they can date the paint at 12,000 years. So the culture was already developed 12,000 years ago when it was painted. So I'm talking about the yogic, the body poses these guys are in. So we have this, our mainstream science has this bias of this was a great guy. So, unless you can prove him wrong, you have to take everything he said for fact. I take it as an opinion, anybody else's opinion. Now, when we look at this stuff, there are sites all over the world that are all aligned in the same period. There's a site that I believe it's Pumapunku is aligned at a 12,000 year sunrise and sunset. The arc of the sun travels between two towers. You look at some of the temples in India, same thing. The doorways line up on certain days. The sculpture of the churning of the Milky River, that's in Indonesia. It's not Angkor Wat. It's the big one, the big temple over there. There's a sculpture on the wall that shows deities and demons pulling back and forth on a snake, and in that are numbers. They're numbers of progression. Graham Hancock did an entire series with his wife, doing all the photography for it on that. Just brilliant stuff, and it's his opinion. It's not, I'm not saying this is fact. I'm just saying that there's all this compendium of circumstantial evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worthy of a lot of deep diving and stuff. And let's keep moving just so we don't run out of time. But thank you for taking us through that. All right, here we go.
They then did a assay in Antarctica in which they did a whole sky and found that the sound comes from everywhere. Now, we're not talking about a specific frequency. We're talking about a complex group of frequencies that form harmonies. The interesting part about it is that these frequencies and harmonies happen to be similar to the Solfeggio scale. The Solfeggio scale has a center C at 432 hertz.
Okay, now there was a lot of discussions around this. So 432, as an editor, as an audio editor, and I've been a recording engineer, I've recorded bands, and to my understanding, A440 is like a standard that everybody tunes everything to. Now there's a massive movement of people that have the tools, and I have those tools, and we convert it to 432. It's to shift A to 432. And I can do that. And in fact, on all of the music in Human Change, I did that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I
I think
noticed.
are you talking about something different than that? You're talking about,
No,
you
no,
said
no. I'm
C.
talking about saying Solfeggio. Actually, Benjamin Franklin created a instrument called the harmonica, and Tchaikovsky wrote. I don't know if there's I'm not that good with like classical music as far as the whole the name of the different types of music or operas or anything, but he wrote a compendium of music specifically for the Solfeggio scale. And you have a meridian or a nonlinear response when you listen to that music. And it's an ethereal feeling that you get. Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies, played on an harmonica, is an excellent example of what I'm talking about. So our bodies react in very unusual ways. Now, another Mike Dunn, he was a disc jockey in um, the Daytona Beach area back during the spring break days of the 1980s. He was very popular. Another guy named Laszlo Mendez, and a guy calls himself Dead Mouse, used these techniques that were in Tchaikovsky's music to generate dopamine drops during raves, and that they became extremely popular with their mixing of music. They weren't musicians themselves, well, sort of, but they were mix masters, and they would actually bring people up to the point and then create the drop, and people would get a dopamine rush off from it. And that was one of the before the.
I've been getting paid.
Oops.
Say again.
I don't know what that was. A video played somewhere.
Yeah, that
Go
was
ahead.
weird. So these sounds, I think, were where like sitar music was tuned originally. There were different instruments, historical instruments that are. Some people tune them differently now. I've heard guitars played that were tuned to Solfeggio.
Yeah. So Solfeggio is the tuning to 432. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's one of
Okay.
the frequencies. I thought it was center C, but you're saying it's an A.
Yeah,
That's
A
not a musician.
440 is what every instrument tuner that I've ever worked with, A 440. Because I mean, even on so say digital keyboards,
Yep.
you sample libraries, you can go adjust it from A 440 to 432. So yeah, I mean, a guitar is
I
the
think
easiest thing to
568
tune.
is one of the notes.
And then there's the resonance things, which get into the chakra. I know people
Yep.
might, anyways, but yeah, it's
Yeah, the
okay.
whole Kundalini. Actually, I think the whole Kundalini study is they're looking at the same thing. Not that I don't follow Kundalini or anything, but I have a sense that with some of the descriptions I've heard of the feeling coming up from your feet or the feeling coming down from the top of your head, I think they're actually experiencing the same thing.
Yes, it is the same thing. It's opening energy. It's triggering or activating energy centers within your body, and these energy centers also go above your head and below your feet. So it's like the etheric and the physical, but it's the same thing that you guys are talking about.
Now, we're going to jump ahead just a quick thing because I see we're coming up on an hour fairly quickly here in 12 minutes. But I mentioned the fact that people are looking at things like remote viewing. Now, this is now public. It had been top secret since early 1967. This was some of the work of Stanford Research, and the Bob Monroe funded the Monroe Institute afterwards. But
And you had a role in that, like you.
not a role. I
You
did
were a
communications
student?
control. Yeah. So
Communication control?
Yeah. My particular job was to verify source of information, transport of information, and need to know and delivery of information. Okay, it's called Telecommunications Control Officer.
And that was
Now-
with Monroe Institute or somebody
No.
else?
No, that was with the United States Defense Intelligence Agency.
Okay,
Yeah.
but you kind of got training along these
Yeah,
lines.
I got training out in Santa Ana. A guy named Jim Channon. He was a freakazoid hippie dude. I think he was a colonel. He had a boss, General Stubblebine, that was like a really hardcore guy. And then there was my mentor when I was in school. He went by John Anderson. He was actually associated with it too. Now, the project originally was called Gondola, and they went out and looked for people with unusual minds to basically make use of. Now, Stargate was one of the things that came out of it. Now, there is something called the Gateway Experience, and simply what Gateway Experience is that you're able, through a series of suggestions and progressions, to synchronize your heart with the echo of the blood vessels in your, for instance, there's an elasticity to your femoral arteries, there's an elasticity to your renal arteries, and as your heart pulses, there's a responding echo pulse that comes back from that. Now, when those synchronize, when you go into what's called sync, then some interesting things happen. Your brain can actually increase communication between left and right sides of your brain. And there's a sense that allows you to experience similar to when you drive. When you drive a car, you hop in the car, 5 minutes in, you can pretty much sense where the front and rear bumper are, where your side mirrors are. You get a feeling like if there's a car coming up behind you, you may not see it, but you kind of sense it. That is like an extension of your sixth sense, if you want to call it that. It's not, I don't like the psychic stuff and all that stuff. It's just, this is like an intuitive gut feeling or intuition that we have. And what the Gateway program did was bring people to the Gateway experience and help them to explore this quality of humans. Now, it was used in opposition to Soviet research in parapsychology. The Soviets were looking at methods of producing mechanical devices that would increase psychic powers. The CIA had a program separate from the Stargate program that they tried to use psychic assassins. They would literally try to have people harm animals. Puppies is what it was. They would have people use their minds to try to harm puppies. Now,
Did they succeed?
I didn't participate, or I only have a vague knowledge of that in, like where some of the direction that Stubblebine was pushing for. He wanted a weapon. And
Right.
So at that time, these guys were freaking bizarro. Back then they called people pingers, people in personnel in need of growth. I was 17, 18 years old and hardcore. I mean, hoorah, just absolutely hardcore. These guys were smoking pot. They were tripping. They were just a mess. But the information that they provided was correlative. It actually was correct. And that was, the information is validated. And that was my job. So at that point, that's, it's interesting because the way to get to that point, there's a myriad of different ways. There's all kind of shamanic traditions. Terrence and Dennis McKenna explored DMT and various hallucinogens. Rupert Sheldrake was looking at the practical effect of it. And the guys out at Stanford were doing a electrogyrograph experiments. You also had Clive Baxter, who used to use plants to calibrate polygraph detectors. And when he would use the plant to, this is so weird. So he would clamp the galvanic sensor onto the leaf of a plant. When he would kill shrimp, like brine shrimp, the plant would react. If he cut a leaf off the plant would react. If he thought about cutting the leaf off the plant would react. They did random studies, double blind. They put little mechanical devices that would randomly kill the shrimp. The plant would react. Now, he wrote this up. That was a book called Secret Life of Plants. And I believe it might even be available on Amazon. Now, this is showing that there is some form of communication that takes place between living things. And when things are dead, that communication doesn't exist. However, when they're electrically charged, you do get ghost patterns. And that was the relationship of Carillion photography. So there is a pattern left behind by life. It's an enthalpic pattern. In the case of Rupert Sheldrake's work with morphic resonance, he got onto the idea in the study of monkeys and in birds. There are little birds that use sticks to open clams and things like that. When one bird would figure out on one island, way farther than a bird could fly, every other bird on another island would be doing the same thing. Monkeys would figure out how to open something up, and every other monkey on every other island was able to do it. Now, they called this the 100 monkeys effect. There was also something that happened with xylothane crystals.
So yeah, explain that. That was a question. 100 monkeys effect. So that means one monkey was able to do it, the rest were able to as well.
Yeah, like it would just become miles away. They would just automatically, all of a sudden, have the same comprehension. Yeah.
Wow, interesting. As a species.
Yeah.
So that kind of is what leads to the whole idea of growth in humans, which is that when one human achieves growth, it's going to spread to everybody.
Yeah. One of the fun things, and I mentioned this before in the chats, Ed Daines, whenever he would look into the future, he always came across this really super bright light. And he thought that this was a solar flare or an atomic war or something that would produce an incredibly bright light. And I've started to have the opinion that that actually might be this instant that we all become completely and totally aware and inherently know. I think the light that comes off from us would be incredibly bright. This is, quote, religious enlightenment, where they would show halos around people, or they would show the Buddha illuminated, or, the various Hindu deities with flames or light coming off from them. We may be, as a species, entering the point which, if we have 7 billion of us all of a sudden become aware, I'm talking about this stage of awareness of everything. The amount of light that would come off from this planet would blind everything.
Well,
it would be a giant flash.
Think about even if a fraction of 7 billion became aware, which is happening, consciousness is expanding exponentially right now.
Yep.
Then you have the 100th monkey effect, or the research of Bonnie Basler and the mycelium and stuff. It's all the same thing.
Yeah, and this is what Sheldrake was getting at.
Yeah.
Now, one of the cool things, not too long ago, there was a difficulty in making a crystalline form of xylothane. hopefully that's the right chemical. I believe so. This crystal, they wanted to use xylithium as a sweetener, as a crystalline sweetener, because there's an impression of a temperature change when the xylithium crystal melts. And do you remember when the breath freshening gum all of a sudden wasn't just peppermint and spearmint? It had like sparkles that made your breath fresh like really quick.
Right.
Well, prior to the first lab making the first crystals of xylithium, nobody was able to make it. And when the first lab made the crystals, all of a sudden, without communication between the labs all over the world began to be able to make xylithium crystals. And I may be using the wrong chemical. I just know of the story, but that would be an example of this morphic resonance field, or this idea of changes happening in reality. And there's things that actually show that something is going on similar to, where all of a sudden we have epigenetic shifts in humans. We see this with, I don't know if you guys have noticed that in the last 3 years, we have people who are becoming very weak and people who are becoming very muscular and very strong. There's a dichotomy forming.
Mm-hmm.
And I started noticing that people who tend to be sheepdogs or mama bears — a sheepdog is a guy who, protect his family, protect the neighborhood kind of guy. Those guys are bulking up. And the guy that might be the guy who will steal your wallet if you leave it on the counter, they're getting flabby and weak. And I'm not sure what that's all about, but I did actually notice it. And I've spoken to several guys about it. I go to the grocery store 3 or 4 times a day, and I'm friendly with everybody, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it. The other thing is that just recently, in the last 2 years, you can get a sense of a feeling. It's not like people are walking around, frowning or something like that, where you can see obviously something bad's happening. We know something bad's happening, but there's more distinct feelings. There's a feeling of anger. There's a feeling of remorse, and a deeper remorse, like when someone loses a child, and it's literally in the air. It's not just confined to a single area, but it's on a single day. It might be a great day, and all of a sudden there'll be this like undertow that comes through. And I mentioned to a couple people who are not in any way psychical or fantasy. They're not fantasy people, and they actually told me whole stories of how they're feeling it more and more every day. And I think that may be us becoming aware of each other, more aware of this connection that we all have. This now, the light part of it, or the sound coming off from us, might be the connective system that actually is propagating this wave of change through us all. And that would, tend to lead to confirmation of Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance fields.
Makes total sense. There's we have an invisible, the invisible realm around us. Some people call that the spiritual realm. Some people call it the, ether. There's something that happens there. And I agree wholeheartedly that I know for me personally, I have felt the rapid increase in being able to tune into another person's intention almost.
Yeah, I think that's key right there, because one of the things, there's old scientists thought experiment called Schrodinger's cats, in which the concept of the uncertainty principle in quantum physics is discussed. And this is, or postulated, I should say. This is the idea that things don't actually exist until we intend to observe them. Now, the word intend is very important here, because when we set up equipment to randomly observe, we don't get the response. And an example of this was the double slit experiment. We believe that photons are waveforms, and we believe that photons are particles, and this is what's called the particle wave duality. And when we are focused on measuring them, we see them act as particles. When we allow them to accumulate, we see the wave interaction taking place. Schrodinger created the idea that the uncertainty of the cat being alive or dead in the box was determined by you observing that collapse the uncertainty into an actual reality. So it was either alive or dead. So it existed in uncertain, and then it's alive or dead. When we try to look at particles at the subatomic level, we can know the position of an electron, or we can know the direction of an electron, but we cannot know both. And electrons are supposedly continuously in motion. So that's an uncertainty. When we look at various things, it becomes our intent is obvious at the subatomic. It is very possible that this emergence or this next stage, which is known by the Hindi as, I believe, Dwarpa Yuga. And
Is this the epigenetic change you're talking about?
Yeah, in their tradition, we are currently in Kali Yuga, which is the descent of something called prana, which is the energy of life, basically. And it's an increase in disorder. It's a negative, bad time type thing, destruction. That's what Kali is associated with. When this changes, supposedly we're going into an age of a golden age of immense power and brilliant clarity, brilliant deduction, an ascension of humanity. And if we become, and this is my hypothesis, if we were to become aware of what our intent actually does in unison, it would give us literal powers of creation.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, we would coalesce the probability to exactly what we intend as a group without disharmony.
Is this the 9K sync idea that if you get 9,000 people doing anything?
Yeah, this and that's kind of interesting because that same group out at Stanford that was doing the Gaia experiments were doing prayer experiments. They used Buddhists and they used, I believe it was Catholic or Baptist, but they were Christians, to go in areas where there was civil unrest and simply pray. And by doing so, it changed what happened or what's happening. It literally calmed things. So there is something to it. Now, could it be this same morphic resonance, this intent field, or this, however you want to call it? Yes. Now, in doing predictive analytics in the past, we noticed that when you had trends going in a certain direction, if you attempted to change the outcome of those trends, sometimes they would stay stationary. The same thing would happen. You would replace a part on a machine before it broke, and next day the damn part would break anyhow. And
That's funny.
yeah, and it's like totally bizarre. Why the hell did that happen? Now, what became very interesting was it creates a paradox. That shouldn't happen, right?
Right.
If you take the time to go back in the logs and look, there was something in the past that changed the CRC of the data set. So we have the active data set, CRC, which is known when we pull it off the server, talking about the log files.
Hmm.
And you go back and you look at the server data set and the CRC, cyclic redundancy check, the number is different. So it means there was a historical change when it was written to tape. Something changed in the past. And that's
Mandela effect.
the Mandela effect, yeah. So I think this morphic resonance thing, this intent thing, is actually not constrained by time. Some of the stuff that the guys, the viewers saw, there's no freaking way they saw what they saw. And
Remote viewers you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's just no freaking way. And
Dave, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, so what you're saying, I have, that's exactly the way, like, I kind of see things. We have been manipulated for so long, and we have been gradually, as time has gone on, lied to and controlled by technologies and things that we didn't even realize. And once we kind of were able to, I think this happened in mass in 2018, 2020, we started to individually seek to peek behind the curtain, understand. And once people did that and they understood, then the prior control mechanisms had no power over us anymore. And we were able to actually move forward through our own intent to create and try to ground in the future we wanted.
Yeah, I agree. And this is, I was coyly saying no one can stop what was coming, just because it's a popular
right
thing. If you could imagine if we instantly became aware of each other, of all of us together, what each and every one of us needs, then that became the intent of all of us together.
Sure. Yeah. Of course, as a remote viewer,
that would literally be biblical,
Yeah, and that's why when you say what some of these remote viewers saw as different, they interpreted it differently. One saw a big bright light, one saw nothing. It's because this is genuinely a turning point. It's a moving in out of one yuga into another, into
right.
It is but it's been here. It's been here all along. It's just for some reason
we were unaware. Yeah,
we were unaware. Yeah.
One of the now, I don't practice remote viewing. What's called coordinate remote viewing on a regular basis. I am aware and I am capable to some level of doing it. Now, you don't get absolute information. You get vagaries, and this is what Stubblebine and a lot of the people who were looking at it, they weren't looking at, was it assistive? Was the information assistive, or was it just completely blind? They were looking for, yes, the combination to the lock is 20 left, 20 right, and 20 down, whatever. They were looking for absolutes. Given 3 words, your mind, when you get into the state, the sync state, your mind will actually focus on something. And it could be anything. It could be a paper towel holder on a counter. It could be a screensaver on a laptop or a photograph. It could be anything. And you're not given any clue of what the thing is that your brain will focus on. So you get 3 words, and thinking of those 3 words, think of the correlations between them. It will actually give you information, and the information will be totally like bizarre. Okay. Now, that kind of, when I say bizarre, I'm saying it'll be somebody's name, or it'll be, a red Volkswagen, or it'll be, just some impression is what you get. Now, the person giving you those 3 words has an idea of what those 3 words are queuing for, and he's looking for information associated with those 3 words. And the information you give him is correlated, and it is actually able to be used to know more than you should. And That's what the essence of modern remote viewing is. Now,
Hmm.
there's
Does that work for knowledge too? Information?
yes, it does. Yes, it does. There's a
Wow.
very famous.
How do you tap into that? Holy
Well, you
smokes.
know what? I'll give a good example. Dave did this experiment one night, and
Goja, yeah.
he said, "Okay, I don't even remember the words you said, uh, but I just whatever came to me first was what I needed to say." And so what he just said 3 words, and I came up with citrus trees, oranges, and he said, "You're right around it." The thing that he was targeting on or focusing on was Gavin Newsom.
Mhm.
He's from California, citrus trees, and I thought, that's so hokey, but with doing it more and more,
That's
it
that's
gets better.
exactly how it works. Yes.
Yeah. So it's not like you just tap in and you download all the information with complete accuracy. It takes a little doing, but it does kind of get you around
Yeah.
the thing.
And to
Well,
connect some dots real quick for people who haven't heard it, the CIA, Stargate program was used to spy on the Soviets. I think Dave mentioned that earlier, but just in case anybody's following along a little lost, like
Yeah.
they use this for military applications to spy on the enemy. Even the Soviets used it back on the Americans. So it's a legit practiced thing.
yeah, and it's so ethereal or ephemeral. It's bizarre shit. And I'm a very practical person, and you know the way that I've been practicing a lot more because I'm starting to see more of it. But the way that I practice is when I drive. Now, again, you get into that state automatically when you drive. You feel the vehicle. Um,
That's a great
I have
example.
I have a fast vehicle. I get very bored and frustrated with people who are driving that are in la la land. They're completely distracted. They'll be over in the left lane going, 35 mile an hour, watching TV or whatever, right? It's really bad. I call them libtards in adult strollers, It's and literally they're, you drive past, they're all masked up, but yeah, whatever. So I've begun to use this intuitive thing where I'll extend my feeling out to feel what they're deciding to do. Okay. Now, I've had a couple instances where it felt like it was empty, like I couldn't feel anybody. Okay. And I do this on every time I drive. Okay. So if I'm out on the highway, jump on the highway, and it's almost what do they call that? Prescience or like foreshadowing. I can tell somebody's going to pull out of the lane before I get into it, and I will go into that lane because he's going to get the hell out of my way. And I just do it in a flow. I'm not focusing or anything like that. I'm just letting myself feel their intention to turn the wheel. And when I feel it, and as I drive, and I drive very fast. Okay, not we're talking 30 to 40% faster than most traffic on the highway. So I don't want to get myself arrested for felony driving, but it's in excess of posted speed limits by far, usually double or more. So the net result is that as I'm doing this, I get long distances very quickly. 12 miles usually takes me just under 4.5 minutes. Okay, give you an idea of speed.
Right.
Now, this is heavy traffic in Florida, where we now have 23 million people in our state. So we don't have casual open lanes anymore.
That's crazy. So we're talking about human change. What can we do as humans to embrace this? I mean, to some degree, it's going to happen around us as other people grow. But again, you said you're a practical person. Practically speaking, what should we be doing to prepare for this, to enter into this? What type of actions should we be doing?
The very first thing we need to do is actually just greet every person you meet. It's phenomenal. Try it. It's just we got into this thing where everybody looks at their screen. They have this defensive mechanism. You would be surprised at how engaging everyone is once you greet them. Walking to and from your car, just you pass by somebody. Hi, how you doing today? Right? That's all that's necessary. And in doing that, you make these really cool connections. So, I get like cheap watermelons. I get, just insane things. Okay. Just really, it makes your world so much better to begin with. My wife laughs because I go to the grocery store and everybody in the grocery store, all the employees of the grocery store know me, right? That's because I'll take the minute to say, hey, how you doing? Oh yeah, my back's hurt. No, did you try Chonka Piedro and get rid of that, that kidney stone? I get the sense that they have a kidney stone, right? And that's how you develop it, is you engage with people. You have to engage. Anybody asks me a question, I'm compelled to answer it.
So
that's what's going to emerge us. And as we become more and more aware, then our intents will shift in, not intensity, but our intent will shift to a more common goal. And I believe that common goal is going to be awesome.
So I mean,
I have no idea what it's going to be, but it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of growth in my own life, and for over the last 10 years, and I don't know if it's just me on my journey, and everybody who grows up does that, but as I've heard from you and other people, perhaps this is a unique experience for us at this time, and I mean, so unified prayer things, unified meditation. Different people have different ways of exploring that spiritual aspect. So group things, I'm assuming, are important. Individual time,
fellowship, yeah. However you obtain it, fellowship.
So would you think that the lockdowns that we experienced is an attempt to stop that?
Absolutely, absolutely, by far. The statistical use of the statistical success of isolation and quarantine on containing disease has been known to be a failure since 1919. Wow. Every place it's ever been tried, it's an absolute failure. Why was that the first choice they made?
That's amazing.
The masks are scientifically ludicrous, but yet they isolate people. If you were to go into an occult, not even a cult, military, what's the first thing military does? Cut your hair. Takes away your personal identity. Most people will spend 10, 15 minutes doing their hair every morning before they leave the house, right? Mm-hmm. It becomes your impression of yourself when you look in the mirror. They take that away. Children, the very first thing they do is they recognize, I'm talking about babies, will recognize facial expression to identify emotional state. Try it with a baby sometime. You smile at a baby will smile back. Okay. You can smile with your eyes. Now, if you take that away, they've discovered now, especially in the school districts, that it causes developmental delays in children. So they masked all these kids up for 2 years. These kids got like serious psychological problems. They have trouble, almost like some of the kids with what do they call it? It's not Asperger's. It's I'm sorry. Autism. The spectrum disorders, where they have this inability to directly look somebody in the eye, or they have an inability to look at someone's face. That's what they've done to these kids. They've created the same circumstance in them. Now, if we are becoming a unified brotherhood of man, for lack of a better descriptive term, to curtail that would be to isolate. And it seems like this has been the tendency and the intent of the last 20 years. When we look at the idea of social media, as a matter of fact, is not a unifying thing, it's an isolating thing.
Mhm.
Because instead of people engaging with the people around them, they're focused on the app. They're looking at a small little screen, confining their vision within a short distance. And that has real serious psychological problems. Now, I've run into people, I don't know the Gen Z, Gen X, but in their mid 20s, okay, that when they are in a difficult situation are unable to look at a person directly in the eye. They'll grab for their phone. They're panicked when they can't find their phone. And that's something unique. Now, I also, I'm working with somebody right now teaching him, and he had a little bit of a learning disability that we seem to have identified and been able to solve. And it was the expectation of immediate response. So just like an addicted compulsive gambler will return to the machines to feed that addiction. Now, the addiction is the stimulus that's provided by the machines. So in the case of a lot of the apps and the social media things, that people get small dopamine drops, they get small serotonin drops, they get even oxytocin off from these apps. Now, a lot of that stuff is bots. It's literally robotics or automation providing that to them. And what happens is when they're in real world situations and something becomes difficult or challenging, they seek to jump to the end. They want to take a shortcut. They want to get past this difficult part to get that reward. And at first, it looks like somebody who's been verbally abused. Okay. But what ends up happening when you look at it over a longer period of time and actually watch it, it's because they're not getting that bump, that dopamine drop. And by letting them recognize it, they're able to control it better. Now, no psychologist, and I took psychology just because I took command school, so I had to take psychology for that. But we didn't cover any of this crap. I've just recognized it. Now, as we move forward, we're going to become aware more and more of the people around us. So we're going to see and experience people's worst thoughts and their most joyous thoughts at the same time. And developing empathy and compassion for your fellow man. I hear people say, "Oh, I hate people." No, you hate the way people act. Okay? People are pretty cool, but you hate what they're doing. Now, as we develop this empathy, the focus of this spike protein affects an area of the brain that was originally called the God module when it was first publicly written about. This area of the brain was the area of intent in a patent in 2002 as a disruptive. It was a prion-like material that was used. The idea was to spray it on religious people and remove the religiosity.
Sure.
It affects a portion of the brain that gives us a sense of empathy or religious conviction.
Right. So people are trying to stop our growth. They're trying to do whatever they can.
Yeah. And
so
I think
paint a picture for us.
This whole attack that we've been under now, this most recent attack, is just that. It's somebody trying to block what is coming.
I've heard that they blocked the gates of Jerusalem to prevent Jesus coming back the way the Bible says. This sounds like the exact same futile
same
attempt.
kind of mentality. Yeah.
I've got to stop this. So paint a picture for us now. We've heard that what we can do is we can just connect with people, go to places where people are, say hello, make an attempt to connect with people, resist the temptation to isolate, go be with people, be present. And paint a picture for us of, like, again, just to entice the imagination, to help people see where we're going from your perspective. What is the unity? What's the end game for that? I mean, is it 10
Well,
years, 5 years, 20 years? Like, you're not going to be exact, but
right.
what's going to
The
be
day
the
that
end
it
goal?
happens, here's one thing that um, it's a biblical passage, and I'm not a Bible thumper by any means, but it was a statement that on the end day, every tear will be wiped from their eyes.
What?
And I thought about that, and that really bothered me because we are, as people, we are the accumulation of all of our memories. We are the accumulation of both the good times and the bad times. I wouldn't want to forget any of my friends that are gone. Okay, that they were all part of me. Now, how could this happen that every tear would be wiped from our eyes? Unless time no longer mattered and all things, everywhere, every when, became one. All of us, everywhere, every when, now.
That's powerful. Unity of all things.
And not in a hive mind way, right? Like an
No,
individual. Yeah,
each one of us being there,
right.
being present and being every bit of ourselves,
Yeah.
all together, all understanding, not
Harmonic.
understanding, comprehending,
Yeah.
It
harmony.
would be harmonic unity where each of us is different and it adds to this
Yes.
collective presence.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And we
It's
understand each other, and we have abilities to heal. That type of stuff's going to happen, right? I mean, that's what I'm saying. Paint
It's
a picture
happening.
for us.
Dude, this is happening, and this is not. It's not fiction. Okay.
And you've had some health challenges. I mean, tell people about that and what you're doing.
Okay, so I got my blood work back. Anybody with EGFR less than 80 is considered 100% disabled. Okay. EGFR is your effective glomar filtration rate. This is the rate at which your kidneys are able to separate toxins from your body. Now, my current EGFR is 35. I'm 60 years old. I'm 237 pounds. I have a little over 6% BMI. I do not work out. I'm gaining about 2.5 to 3 pounds of muscle per month. And all I'm doing is eating and working on myself. Now, this is something that's happening. Now, I did learn in martial arts training how to increase the speed at which I heal. And it's freaky. I can usually heal a laceration in about 3 days. And I'm talking deep wound healing, not just surface skin over or scarring. But it's the fact that I'm still alive. I have to balance everything manually. I have no metabolic autonomic function. I have no renin to provide feedback for angiotensin, ADP to ATP conversion. So all of that is manually balanced, and yet I'm thriving. I'm literally becoming stronger and stronger every day, and it's amazing. I know that something's helping me stay alive, and I know that this is coming, and it may be what was done in the future is helping me now. So yeah, it's kind of a bizarre thing, but I lost my left kidney completely, not to disease, but to injury. And I lost 2/3 of my right kidney. Now, for a period of time, I was using different technologies to generate glomar tissue. I was using stem cells and different new technologies to generate kidney tissue. And I was successful in that I generated 88% of a right kidney. However, the amount of nephrons in that kidney are still at a third of what's normal. So even though the tissue's there, the vacuoles are there, the blood vessels are there, but there's not the glomar filtration rate is still very low. So is it possible that someday I'll figure out how to cure myself? It's actually possible. but I've been terminal now 14 years. I've been
Wow.
14 years like this. Average person at this rate dies in 4 months. I've not had to go on dialysis, but I have to watch everything.
And you were shot, right?
Yeah, it was a combat injury. Yep.
Okay. And now, how somebody like me, how do I unlock that reality and intention? Like, what's the process for me? Like, is it here
When,
right now, and I
when
just
I
have to?
when I first learned about it, I learned a technique of self hypnosis. Some people call it deep meditation, in which you bring yourself into a state in which you're, quote, centered, okay, and you isolate, you block out any thoughts of anything outside of you, and you start doing what's called an inventory, where you feel the tip of your toe, you feel the bridge between toes, the skin flap there, you feel slowly, you begin to be able to feel blood rushing through your body. Now, one of the cool things about the way cellular mitosis happens is that heat, electrical, chemical energies all increase the energy level necessary to create the cell division in mitosis. There is a point in cellular mitosis that something triggers the cascade that splits the cell and it comes apart. Now, when you focus on something, it actually will increase the number of times that happens. So cellular mitosis is affected by intent. Literally, if in the case of, I've had to have my palate removed several times. I have a plate in my face. So when they need to adjust it, I have to get it removed, and hurts like you have no idea, worst pain on earth. It's a CNV2, causes trigeminal seizures. But when that is open and that cut is made around the perimeter of my palate against my gum, I have to heal that. I have to heal it fast. Fastest I've done it so far is 3 days.
Wow.
I had a laceration between my toes on my left foot, about an inch long, an inch deep. That again, 3 days.
So you're telling me if I want to unlock this, I need to learn meditation.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, just it and honestly, there's a this isn't an ad for Monroe. I've got no ties with them. I'm going to talk to Joe Monteagle eventually here, hopefully. But the Monroe Institute had a product called HemiSync that they were selling, producing, whatever.
Yep.
That process of bringing yourself into synchronization is what the goal is in meditation. The HemiSync program allows you to experience the gateway experience very quickly. It's like for novices. So instead of entering into this quasi hypnotic state, you can simply put on a pair of headphones and fall asleep. And eventually, most people have the experience. Now, once you get to the point where your physical body recognizes how you get into sync, you can return into sync very quickly. Now, guys like, and I don't know Michael Jaco. I've never looked at any of his stuff, but just some of the things that he said leads me to believe that he's done the same thing as Ingo Swann was teaching. Now, Ingo Swann had this idea of a love vibration, getting into the point where you feel the feeling of love come over you.
Mm-hmm.
When you feel that, then you extend yourself out and just feel out beyond you from that. And that is the exact same thing. It is the same sensation. Now, I use bitter chocolate to get the oxytocin sometimes. There's different ways to get there. But when you get into that chemistry or function of your body, you become aware. And once you become aware, you can block the pain. You can stop pain, literally stop it.
Wow.
You can stop convulsions. I have a severe tremor that causes my abdominal muscles to contract severely, and that's left over from the injury.
Mm-hmm.
that contraction is strong enough that when I'm completely relaxed, just about to fall asleep, it runs through me like a shudder, and it's like doing 1,000 crunches. Okay, that's the intensity of it. That shudder I control using this method. So that's a neurologic issue.
Well, that's incredible. I mean, I'd love to, again, if Mysteries of Earth can be a place for humans to come and help ascend the ladder,
Yeah.
that would be amazing. So, whatever we can do to help, I would love to keep the discussion going on that. And intention is everything. It's amazing, the thing about love. I mean, that's for over a word ago when I was in prayer, trying to acquire all this knowledge. It was just like, you're responsible for all the knowledge that you acquire, but
Yeah.
love is so important. I remember having that realization when I was in prayer. It's amazing to hear you talk about it as such a powerful
One of the
state.
fun things, Enoch named off all the fallen angels, and in the compendium he mentioned an entity called Azuzel, and Azuzel, its function was to teach men how to fashion weapons of war and women to wear makeup. Now, ponder on this just for a second. If you had an entity that had fallen from the grace of the Creator and it wished to become an enemy of mankind, it would never tell you a weapon that would actually defeat it. Now, in its darkness, the idea of a single match can fill a room with light. Okay. If you were able to actually use love as a weapon, it would vanquish evil. The prospect of evil in man, an entity of evil, however you view evil, love is the antithesis of it. Evil cannot exist where love exists. Now, this is kind of a weird thing because I had a conversation. I get tasked, I get jobs once in a while. I do electronics, so I have an acuity for it, an unusual acuity for it. But we were talking about the capability of recording emotions. This company in Hawaii with their cameras are able to identify emotions, and they've set up TSA points around the country and actually will look for people who are extremely extremely anxious, more than typical. And they do this through the imaging. And when they identify those people, it cues, and those people are checked a little closer. Okay. Now, this has progressed since the advent of TSA. It's now become possible to take a baseline and broadcast an emotion. So literally think of broadcasting the sounds coming off from somebody who is angry or confused or
Right.
Any of our ambivalent, any of our emotional states. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What if we were able to broadcast love? What if we were able to broadcast from cell towers? And let's say there's a riot going on. All of a sudden, you turn on a cell tower so they intermodulate, and the cell towers produce a feeling of love in the people. Now,
Right.
I have ethical issues with that, but wouldn't that also be able to be a weapon to use against evil?
Right. That's a very interesting idea. Well, this is amazing that you're still that your health is still here, and what a gift
Yeah,
for you.
I'm like as healthy as I've ever been, but I'm dying, right? So
what a quandary. Well, I mean, this is amazing. This is quite the gift to share with us, helping humans understand the change that we are embarking upon, and it's like this is your purpose.
could be. And all glory to the Creator.
Absolutely, and it's so amazing that your experiences have all compiled into your understanding of this. And I mean, what an amazing gift, the 9-minute human change.
It is so coincidental. And I don't believe in coincidence, but you know, tracking my life. And just recently, I've been tracking it a little more. It's like, holy crap, you know. We laugh about my cell phone because of the telephone numbers on the cell phone. You know, it's the people that have been in contact. You know, it's pretty funny.
That's amazing. So just human change. Get around people. Don't isolate.
Don't isolate, embrace.
Engage. Presence of love. What an amazing discussion. What a nice phrase. Good. Well, thank you so much for everybody's time. You're
Thank
good?
you, Dave,
Okay.
and-
Thank you, Sarah,
Yeah.
for being here. Thank
You
you,
guys are
Dave.
more than welcome. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you.
All right. We'll play the... Yep. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in. And here's the video. We'll catch you guys next time.
Around us, there's a feeling in the air, so to speak. We're having an epigenetic process. When a species is put under stress, it will adapt to the stress by creating new systems for it to be able to survive. So this adaptation that's taking place is allowing us to become more aware of this field, this biomorphic resonance field. As we mature, we become more and more aware of how aspects of our intent create changes in our reality. Now, we're not talking about manifesting $1 million in your left hand. We're talking about the combined effort of mankind. It can bring the planet down or the planet up. It can bring us health or it can bring us disease. We have to decide. We have to recognize that change.